all season and break all their opponents. They will take the championship from the inept and give it back to you, the people of Oakland. The Raiders are the instrument of your liberation. I present to you the hosts of this radio show, Shawn Wally and Sean Boyd.
Good evening, everyone, or shall I say good evening, Raider Nation. Welcome to this second edition of Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central, where you get your full fill of Raiders football information. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Boyd, one half of the Double S Express, coming to you from Sacramento, California. And I have my broadcast partner on, the best in the business, Shawn Wally, up in the Pacific Northwest. Sean, how you doing today?
Mr. Boyd, what's going on? It's been an interesting football weekend, and the Raiders were definitely in the mix, and week number 2 of the preseason is come and gone.
Yeah, you know, of course, the Raiders are coming off of a tough loss over this past week. I know that there's a lot of talk as far as, you know, these games not counting, but man, it wasn't a good showing to start out for that second game of the season. But nonetheless, it's a learning experience, and of course, we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. How are things going up there in the Pacific Northwest?
Sunny and bright blue skies, and hey, summer's still here, so even though we got football and everybody thinks fall, but temperature is still nice and hot, and things are looking up, and Raider Nation's got to be ready for another football season.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and with all the new changes and everything that are going on down here in Napa and in Oakland, there is sense for optimism because there is change going on in the camp. But at the same time, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And my goodness, that game this past week or a couple days ago was just unbearable to look at in the first half. And of course, we're going to go over that in just a few minutes. I wanted to bring in our guest who is kind enough to join us, and that is none other than Ryan Riddle. Ryan Riddle does beat writing for the
Bleacher Report.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. The Bleacher Report. And I believe we have Ryan Riddle online now. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Shawn and Sean, I'm good. Good. Thanks
right.
for having me, by the way.
Hey, thanks for being on the show, man, and really appreciate you taking the time out to share with us a little bit, you know, your thoughts on how the season is going and how it's starting. But first, you know, just to bring everybody up to speed, Ryan, hey, you played some college ball in the Bay Area, Berkeley, Cal Berkeley, that is. And why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
And probably more applicable is I was drafted by the Oakland Raiders in 2005, 6th round. So I know a little bit about Raider Nation. And after being cut by them and moving on to a few other teams as a journeyman, I am now a sports writer. Covering all things NFL. For Bleacher Report.
For those of you who don't know, after your NFL career, after your playing career, you definitely go into journalism. And man, you know, playing with the Oakland Raiders, of course, being drafted in 2005, kind of a mixed bunch, I would say. I believe you had Kerry Collins as a quarterback. I believe Marquez Tuiasosopo was in the camp.
Yeah.
You know, a head coach, Norv Turner, at the time. I believe you guys finished 4-12. You know, man, tell us about
fun.
that. It was, to say the least. And so, you know, of course, the Raider
when you
Nation.
When you talk about the Raiders, you know, a lot of change and yet a lot staying the same. And I hope you're right about the promising future of Raider Nation. I look upon them fondly as a team that's drafted me, and I definitely hope for the best. Well, we got a lot of holes to fill, and this is a complete undertaking in terms of a restructuring of the team. Hopefully they're on the right track to do this the right way. They have been completely hamstringed by cap issues. But back to the 2005 North Turner days, as I guess your question was asking me, it was hell. I mean, back then, you know, the late great Al Davis was roaming the hallways, and everyone was trying to avoid him when you're not winning games, let me tell you, because you do not want to bump into Al Davis in the hallway after a loss. He is just, he will chew your head off. And everyone kind of knows because he had this smell to him that everyone knew what it was. And if you could smell it, that means, be careful because Al Davis is close by. And he would just bump into me and go, Riddle, make a damn tackle out there. Like, okay, that's sir, Mr. Davis. Yes, sir. But, it's losing and having a struggling season is one of the most stressful times in a football career, because when I was in college, we had a lot of success. That was fun, obviously. And the differences are palpable, to say the least. But things are different, right? Things are changing, right, guys?
Yes, you know, and so I believe that things are definitely changing. It's going to take a little bit of time, and I've said this before. I believe that Reggie McKenzie has the organization moving into the right direction. One of the good things about that, Ryan, is that Mark Davis is allowing Reggie to actually, you know, form this organization in the way that he feels it should go. And of course, bringing in one Dennis Allen from Denver, I believe that Dennis has the savviness, he has the soundness to actually put together a solid football team. And so it just remains to be seen on how these guys are going to draft players. And you can see a little bit of the 3-card money that's going on right now, as you had mentioned, with the salary cap issues. But, you know, I do believe that Reggie McKenzie and Dennis Allen are moving the team in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with it, especially considering this isn't the time to really get into the total analysis of how good of a job they have done, because their options have been incredibly limited. They're basically in cleanup mode from all the damage that has been done from the years prior. So once they get out of cleanup mode, which this is probably, I would say, the last year of official cleanup mode from the old regime. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And then next year, we're going to really start seeing the fruits of Reggie McKenzie's labor and Dennis Allen as well. And so, but we do hope and we do expect, I think, even that this year there's going to be signs of improvement. There's been a lot of change. Some of it makes a lot of sense. Some of it is a little bit of a head scratcher. But some of the guys are looking good. Like the game last week, Omar Gaither really stood out to me. I thought he was making a lot of good plays on defense. And some of those younger guys, gosh, they're really going to have to step up, because this team is just loaded with unproven young talent that they had to either draft or get at a low cost. And Seal Moore, he seems promising. He should definitely upgrade the defense. But what are our realistic expectations for this year?
Yeah, well, if you're asking me, the realistic expectations are, you know, probably around a 5-11 team. And, you know, with that being said, I mean, I know that doesn't sound like a lot of wins, but what we're looking for now, or what I'm looking for as a Raider fan, is to see some progression, you know, see some glimmers of an actual solid foundation, see if there's if Matt Flynn can actually take over as the true starting quarterback. And if there's some actual movement going on, I believe that, you know, of course, Raider Nation will be upset at the record, but they won't be upset if they see a little bit of progression.
Yeah, I saw Matt Flynn showed a little promise with his accuracy the other day, but so limited with his physical tools. I wish so badly that Pryor was somehow able to step it up more as a pocket passer so that we can use his dynamic skills, running, read optioning, getting out there, rolling out, running for first downs when nobody's open, and just making the right decisions. His upside, it's frustrating to see that you can see that he's just not there to be a starter yet. But it's frustrating. And I would say watch out for, I know Rod Streeter has taken a lot of the headlines as the wide receiver, number one wide receiver, and just beating out Moore, and you got that young guy, Butler, rising up. But I've always been a fan of Jerron Kreiner, who really just impressed me in all facets of his game coming out of college. Just dynamic after the catch, good size, solid route runner, nice, reliable hands. I think he's going to be a really big difference maker going into this season and throughout. Even if he's the number 2 or number 3 wideout, I think he's going to make some big things happen. And yeah, back to that 5-win season prediction. Yeah, that I would say that's realistic. Anything above 5, they overachieved.
Right.
That's the voice of former Raider draft pick Ryan Riddle joining us here on Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central, along with the Double S Express. And Ryan, let's get to your career a little bit. And what was the biggest transition you had to make going from a college standout at Cal, moving on into professional football? Other than the nice check, what were some of the big transitions you had to make moving on to the pro game?
Yeah, well, the biggest transition for me was going from a defensive end to a middle linebacker in a 3-4 system. And back then, Rob Ryan was the coordinator, and they were trying to duplicate what they had going on in New England, which is how he got the job done there. And, well, I was drafted to be the next Teddy Bruschi, big shoe to fill, right? So I'm starting from scratch. I know very little about the linebacker game, coverages, reads. Basically, you have to be the quarterback of the defense. Move the D line left, move it right, find the tight end, find the strength of the offense, make checks for the secondary, all of that. And so learning all of that from coming from the defensive line position, where it was just essentially line up, shut your mouth, go get the ball. That took a long time to learn, and was a drawn-out acclimation process that once I started getting the hang of it, it's just time in the NFL. It's not something that you have a lot of. And out goes Norv Turner, in comes Art Shell, and switching the 3-4 defense to the 4-3, making me an obsolete piece in that defense. And even then, so I was like learning middle linebacker in a 3-4 system to learning every single linebacker position in a 4-3 system in 2 years. And, to be honest, I was actually doing a pretty good job of it. I just wasn't an ideal fit in a 4-3 system. But those type of adjustments are they're tough. They're tough. It's tough just to make a transition from a position you're familiar with into the NFL. And the talent, the guys, the first day I walked out onto practice, from the first mini camp after the draft, I remember walking out there, got my soft shells on and my helmet, and I'm like, wow, I'm a Raider. And I go outside, out on the practice field, and my mouth just dropped that these guys are so incredibly huge. Not only are they the biggest, baddest, strongest, fastest men in the world, but they're Raiders, and Al Davis drafts the biggest of the biggest, the fastest of the fastest, and all of those. So it was like a caricature of football players all on one field. And I'm just like, what the heck am I doing here? I was like a guy who's never lifted a weight in my life, and somehow why I don't even belong here. It was crazy.
Ryan, what are some of your first thoughts and memories thinking back to your days with the Raiders, of the Raider Nation, of the fan base and the support?
There's no one crazier, more passionate, more supportive Raiders fans that are, and they're there through thick and thin. They were one of the brightest spots about being a part of that organization, because you can just feel the history and the legacy of that organization sort of embodied in the fans, and the way that they would wait outside the gates of the facilities just to support the guys, just to support the team, not because they wanted autographs, not because they wanted to get anything. They had signs, they were sharing their love and cheering, and just a constant system of support that, when I was in New York with the Jets, it was, you kind of felt like the 300-pound girl in a club. No one's looking, no one's caring, no love for the Jet organization from a fan base perspective.
For those of you just tuning in, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No. I was like, did I shut everything down with this?
For those of you just tuning in, we have Ryan Riddle with us, with the Bleacher Report, sports writer for the Bleacher Report. Hey, Ryan, just a quick question. You'd mentioned the mystique of the Raiders. You mentioned Al Davis, being this type of person that puts the hammer down. What was it, in the locker room to where, we just couldn't put things together? Is it something that you could put your finger on? But what was the sentiment in the locker room as far as players?
So is the question to tap into what could be some elements at play that led to this drawn out rut, or
right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. It definitely starts with Al Davis has to assume some blame, just as he would naturally be able to assume so much of the responsibility for so much of the success of the organization. And I think he started getting caught up a little too much in athletic freaks, workout warriors, guys who passed the eye test. And he's overlooked way too many and way too often. He was overlooking really good football players who might not have quite looked the part. I remember it was just a known thing in the NFL during the Bill Polian years while he was with Indianapolis. If you were to play the Colts and you look at that team, you almost want to laugh at them, because every one of those guys was just tiny, weird bodied, or looked out of shape, looked awkward, didn't really look like an NFL football team. But as we know, Indianapolis knew how to play football. And the Raiders were kind of the athletes who couldn't all put it all together, I would say. And one of the biggest things you have to be able to do with the kind of football Al Davis likes, throwing that long ball, right? Making a lot of big plays down the field, and then having your dynamic running back. We were filling holes in key positions with an unwavering scheme to compensate for what we had talent-wise consistently year in and year out for the better part of the early 2000s. And so Kerry Collins was just not mobile enough. And then all of a sudden, Robert Gallery, a top pick who's supposed to shore up the left side, he can't block. And then the entire offensive line just gets too old all at the same time. Younger guys just learning how to play, and then they had the year where they were the Arizona Cardinals, of last year. You remember that year where the Raiders were just 8 sacks a game team, right? So, and who are you gonna? You got no quarterback that can handle that kind of stuff unless you're Andrew Luck. But
Right.
it was just, there's not one thing that you really point at. It just kind of was like a perfect storm of personnel mishaps, misreads, bad habits getting magnified over time, a closed-off mind.
Yeah, just
bad
a
luck.
just a combination of everything just kind of coming together like you were saying. So
Yeah.
Ryan, tell our listeners here, I believe you have a show, Football Debate Central Radio. And tell our listeners what time they can catch you on Football Debate Central Radio. I believe it's you and Vincent Frank in heated
Vincent,
debates.
Right. Vincent Frank's the co-host. He's a great co-host. He sort of guides us along. And the premise is we bring up topics and we go to war against each other and whoever's our guest, and we either agree or disagree, but definitely all opposing opinions are welcome, and it's a good time. And it's I think we're changing our times around, but it's going to be Fridays.
Fridays 2 p.m. Eastern on Pro Football Central. And hey Ryan, thanks for being on the show, man. And we appreciate your insight. And you, of course, the Raider Nation loves having former Raiders on here, and we look forward to seeing some of your reports on Bleacher Report. Again, Football Debate Central Radio. That's Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you, and Shawn and Sean. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for your time, buddy.
So that was Ryan Riddle on with us. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the game summary with Oakland and New Orleans. You're listening to Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central.
Football fans, check out the official t-shirt apparel shop for the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Check out bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. You think it, we ink it. They have an awesome 24-hour turnaround time. You can also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45255. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
Welcome back to Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central. We just had Ryan Riddle on. And great conversation, Sean, Wally, with one of the former Raiders.
Yeah, he had some great insight on what it was like transitioning from Cal football at college to the pros and coming out on the field. And, you know, he's feeling like a little bit of a boy among men there with, you know, the best athletes in the world. And they're trying to go out and play Raider football. And there were some tough times then, and trying to right the ship and get things rolling, and Ryan's doing good things on Bleacher Report and also here on Pro Football Central.
Yeah, you know, we didn't get a chance to talk with him about his days at Cal and with Jeff Tedford. Man, you talk about a decent team. They went 10-2 that year, lost in the Holiday Bowl, unfortunately, to I believe it was Texas Tech. 45-31 or something like that. But the actual players on his team, he was talking about being starstruck by, you know, when he walked onto the field for the first time with the Raiders. But man, he's coming out, you know, from Cal with Aaron Rodgers on his team, J.J. Arrington, Justin Forsett, and of course, someone who is very familiar to you up there in the Pacific Northwest, Marshawn Lynch, as a freshman. So, I mean, there were some studs that played for the Cal Bears as well.
Yeah, most definitely. They had a great team, and that was a good time for Cal Bear football. And yeah, you might have thought that he would have been past the starstruck deer in the headlights look, and maybe that bit him a little bit. And, you know, hopefully that maybe we can have Ryan on at some point down the road. And one question that came to light now is, he, at the time, set the Cal record for most sacks in a season at 14.5. And then here They take this awesome D lineman in college, and like he was saying, trying to switch him to linebacker, and he's deer in headlights, scratching his head, going, what's going on? I don't know these terms. I don't know. I'm not a quarterback, and I'm now having to lead and quarterback these guys. I just know, like a bulldog, get down and go get the meat.
Yeah, and that's, classic Al Davis, picking the athlete and, believing that he can move him from one position to the next. I believe that Ryan, tried his best, of course. It just didn't work out. But it's good to know that, he has his Northern California ties and still bleeds silver and black. And it was good to have him on the show. So, so switching gears here, man, tell us what went on with the game there. The Raiders, the score was 28-20, but gosh, it doesn't seem like it was as close as the score indicated.
Well, it was almost like a tale of two halves, as the New Orleans Saints down in the Bayou scored often and early in the first half. And looking at the stats, one of the glaring statistics that stands out in big favor for the Saints is number of first downs. New Orleans had 23 throughout the game, while Oakland could only manage 10.
Yeah, and that's a recipe for disaster in any play calling and playbook. I mean, 23-10, that there's no way in the world that you can win.
Oakland giving up 369 yards on defense. That is not going to get the job done. Of course, you've got a lot of second, third, and possibly fourth stringers out there seeing if they can make the club or maybe get signed to the practice squad. So you hope that those numbers will get better, especially in the third preseason game coming up, which tends to be the dress rehearsal for week 1.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to explain here in just a second. Unfortunately, most of the points for New Orleans came from the starting units. And so, 17 points in the first quarter, it just didn't seem like there was too much defense going on for the Raider Nation.
No, not at all. And it started off in the first quarter with a Garrett Hartley 53-yard bomb of a field goal after a 6-play drive that the Saints only had to go 22 yards to get into field goal range. So, yeah, Raider defense held the Saints to 22 yards. That's not a long drive. It's not like Drew Brees marched up and down the field, but early on it was 3-0 New Orleans.
Yeah, but somewhere down the line, watching the game, it looked like Drew was just picking the defense apart. And so, that has to be a concern for Dennis Allen and Jason Tarver, the defensive coordinator, because there's been an added incentive as far as adding DBs and nickel packages for this team, and it just looked like Drew Brees was having a field day.
Well, on their second drive, the New Orleans Saints got a touchdown on the board, and it was a 2-yard run by running back Mark Ingram, giving the Saints a 10-0 lead. And then their next possession, a long march down the field drive, 9 plays, 78 yards, taking 5 minutes and 9 seconds off the clock. 17-0 Saints after a 16-yard touchdown pass from Drew Brees to Kenny Stills. 17-0 Saints after 1 quarter.
Yeah, one of the things that the Raiders are going to have to get better at, and I believe they know this because, I've been mentioning the DBs and the effort that the Raiders have put into strengthening their defensive backs. But it cannot be remiss that defensive line has to put pressure on the quarterback. And if you don't put pressure on the quarterback, it leaves the DBs out there on islands that, there's no way in the world that they can cover past 4, 5, 6 seconds. And so, the defensive line, there has to be somebody, to come in and put some pressure on.
Second quarter, more of the same in the beginning of the period. The Saints start the quarter off with another field goal, a 31-yarder by Garrett Hartley after a 6-play drive. The Raiders only gave up 28 yards, so nothing too terrible there. 20-0 Saints. Garrett Hartley would put the ball through the uprights one more time, making it 23-0 with a 30-yard field goal after a bit of a lengthy 11-play, 55-yard drive.
Yeah, and so at some point you have to ask yourself, if I'm Dennis Allen, when is this going to turn around for us? And there has to be some type of a pulse or a heart check, with this team. And I believe that happened just on this next possession.
Matt Flynn had been sacked 5 times in the first half. And finally, the Raiders put a drive together, a nice 11-play, 82-yard drive. Matt Flynn connecting with wide receiver Denarius Moore on an 18-yard touchdown pass. The Raiders get on the board right before halftime, 23-7 New Orleans, as the teams head to halftime.
Yeah, and what we're looking for, Raider Nation fans, are more of these types of drives. These are the things that Matt Flynn can do once he has the protection given to him. The offensive line has been banged up already in this early part of the season, and they're trying to get the chemistry down as well. They haven't been able to get the the running game going, and so once they can find some type of a base or some type of a consistency, I think Matt Flynn can do this all the time. And with Denarius Moore, I mean, he's one of the better receivers in this young receiving core.
Coming out after halftime, the Raiders giving Raider Nation something to cheer about, making this game a close contest, as all the scoring in the third quarter is done by your Oakland Raiders. A gift from the Saints, a fumble in their own territory. The Raiders get a 1-yard touchdown return by Ryan Robinson, and just like that, it is 23-14, and the Raiders have some life.
Yeah, one of the things that we're finding out in this preseason is that the Raiders' second and third string are just as strong as their starting unit. And so when a lot of the teams start to taper off after their first string sits down, the Raiders have a solid base as far as those second and third string units coming in. And like you said, it paid off.
The next score in the third period, as mentioned, does belong to the Oakland Raiders. It's a 46-yard field goal after a 7-play, -7-yard drive. That's not good, but the points on the board are 23-17 after Eddie Carmona splits the uprights.
Yeah, and so the Raiders have, obviously they're not going to keep 2 kickers, but Carmona has definitely a future in place kicking, and nice strong leg. And, there was -7 yards, but he came in and did what he had to do and put some points on the board.
And to start the fourth quarter, more Raiders scoring, as the kicker you guys have known for the better part of a decade, Sebastian Janikowski, a 50-yard field goal after a 5-play, 11-yard drive. 11 yards better than -7. It's now 23-20 Oakland, and it's looking like the comeback might be happening.
Yeah, I'm sitting there watching this happen, and I'm thinking, man, this is what I'm talking about. The young guys trying to make a spot on the team. They're actually coming through and, have made a game of this. And you have to tip your hat off, to the coaching staff for keeping these guys in the fight. But it just wasn't enough.
That's the voice of Sean Boyd. I am Sean Wally. We are the Double S Express. This is Raider Nation Central Radio as we go through the Oakland Raiders game summary. Preseason week number 2 in New Orleans, finishing up the fourth quarter. Raiders just scored a field goal. It is 23-20 New Orleans. See if the Raiders can finish this great comeback. The next score belongs to the New Orleans Saints, as Will Herring gets a safety to make it 25-20 New Orleans. Safety, never a good thing.
No, that what that tells me is that there's a breakdown in the offensive line, and this is what I've been saying all along. And of course, the Raiders are going to have to try to figure out at some point how to put together a strong offensive line. Of course, you have Jared Beldier that's out with a torn, I believe it's a tricep muscle.
Tricep, yep.
And, you have Nix that's in there at left guard, and Wisniewski. And so you're trying to put these pieces together to see, who's going to be there. You have Khalif Barnes on the right side, and it's going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of work. Tony Sperano is definitely trying to put together a strong offensive line, but it's just not looking that way thus far. And when you give up safeties, especially late in the game, there's no way in the world that you can win.
The Oakland Raiders down 25-20 at the Superdome. A touchdown can win the game. Will it happen? The final score of the game is a field goal, so either way, that's not going to be enough. But the field goal was to Garrett Hartley and the New Orleans Saints, a 28-yarder after a game-clinching 9-play, 71-yard drive. Final score, 28-20. The New Orleans Saints victorious over your Oakland Raiders.
Yes, and so here are some of the things that we can take away from the game. Of course, again, I'd mentioned offensive line needs some work. The passing game was lackluster after the first group, the first string stepped off the field. You had Matt McGloin throwing for 32 yards and Terrell Pryor for 9. What a disappointment that was, Terrell Pryor. I know the Raider Nation were looking for him to actually do some good things. And, of course, Ryan Riddle was saying that a few minutes ago. But you look at Matt Flynn's numbers. You look at 12 of 16 for 124 yards. I mean, Matt, for the whole preseason, his quarterback rating, I believe, it's something outlandish, something like 118 or 119, which is excellent for a quarterback passing rating. And, he just doesn't have the time. And what I'm nervous about is if they can't shore up this offensive line, it could be a short season for Matt Flynn, and they could be looking for quarterbacks, by the midseason because, all these guys are going to be hurt.
Well, the injury bug got Flynn last year in Seattle, and that's part of the reason he didn't have a great competition in training camp with Russell Wilson. And, yeah, you look at his numbers, you're correct. 75% completions in New Orleans, a touchdown, no interceptions. And then you look at Pryor, 1 for 5, 9 yards, yet a lot of Raider Nation on Twitter and various social media outlets are calling for Pryor because he's more exciting. Really? You could have a game manager who's going to distribute the ball to many different receivers, knows how to run the offense, knows what he's doing back there. Yeah, he's not flashy. He's not, a Michael. Well, he's not a Michael Vick by any means in Flynn, but Pryor, goodness.
Yeah.
Upside. The upside is there, but he needs quite a bit more seasoning, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and he's admitted himself. He says, man, I'm just learning how to throw. And so with that being said, I think that he's a hands-on project as far as developing him for the future in the next couple of years. But as far as somebody, your quarterback right now, it has to be Matt Flynn. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. For somebody that's had 5 sacks that was sacked 5 times this past game, I mean, he showed, a lot of resilience getting back in there and slinging the ball and putting up some numbers. So, yeah, I definitely would say, yeah, let's not talk about Terrell Pryor being a starting quarterback anytime soon.
Shawn, you mentioned that Pryor has said that he's still learning how to throw. As a former high school coach of many sports, but football as well, how can that be that nobody has taught this kid how to throw and throw the right way to where maybe he doesn't have to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back right now, and maybe he would be a little bit further ahead?
Yeah, you mentioned it. You mentioned it right there, and the biggest deal is it's not that he can't throw it; it's that he has to throw correctly. And a lot of quarterbacks slip through the cracks because they have a strong arm or they have great athleticism. And at the high school ranks, let's face it, if you can beat the defensive end to the corner, then you're turning it up the field and you have a lot of touchdowns, as far as running is concerned. And I believe he got away with that. And when you watched him at Ohio State, it wasn't that he dazzled us with his arm. He dazzled us with the fact that he could move around in the pocket. And when he tucked the ball and ran, it was exciting. And he beat a lot of teams that way, no doubt about it. And that's what excited Al Davis, was that he had an athlete that he could bring in as a quarterback. But as we all know, in the NFL, things change. And, there every so often there's that special quarterback that comes along, like a Russell Wilson or a Colin Kaepernick, and I believe that's what we're looking at as far as what the Raider Nation wants Terrell Pryor to be. But it takes more than that. When you're looking at a Russell Wilson and you're looking at a Colin Kaepernick, you're looking at a savvy, heady quarterback that not only can they do it with their feet, they can also throw the ball. And so what Terrell Pryor is learning now is he's learning the proper mechanics and how to plant the back foot, how to, zip that ball in there when he needs to, and how to put touch on the ball. And when you're looking at the second level and the third level. And so, these things he's just learning, and, it's going to take a little while.
Shawn, what is your biggest concern, the defense or the offensive line?
Oh, man, that's a good question, because both of them need drastic work. But, I would have to say the defensive line, or actually both sides of the line, offensive line and defensive line, need some work. We have to be able to put pressure on the ball. And, you're looking at Vance Walker at the defensive tackle, Pat Sims, these guys have to, Lamar Houston, they have to, get in there and shake things up. What I've seen the first two games of the preseason for the opposing teams is I've seen the quarterback sitting in the pocket without any duress. And, that's going to make it tough on your DBs and linebackers also having to step up. Maybe Coach Tarver dials it up a little bit and shows a couple of more blitzes. Or maybe he doesn't in the preseason because he doesn't want to show off those blitzes. But at some point, they're going to have to put pressure on the quarterback.
You're listening to Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central with the Double S Express, Sean Wally and Sean Boyd. Mr. Boyd, Drew Brees, Friday night in New Orleans, threw for 202 yards in one half of football.
Yeah, 14 to 18 for 202 yards. Again, that you just can't do that. I mean, and you can't say that, hey, it's preseason, because these guys wanted to win. I know Dennis Allen wanted to go and stick it to his predecessor, Sean Payton, and show him that, hey, this is, I'm just as good as far as, putting together, a solid program. And so, I'm sure that that's something that Dennis Allen mentioned in the locker room that he would like to do. And for them to go out, the first units to go out there and to perform like that, I'm at a loss for words. I'm looking forward to, this upcoming game. And, because what's done is done. Last game was water under the bridge. And now you have the Chicago Bears coming up.
Now, we've touched on a few of the issues in New Orleans. What do you think some of the bright spots were? Matt Flynn's play. Butler had 3 more receptions. So there were a few shining moments for the Raiders.
Yeah, you had Bryce Butler, as you had mentioned. This was his second game and leading the team with in receiving yards. And, if I could find something on the defensive side, I mean, you're looking at Jack Crawford. He had 7 tackles, one sack, and 1 tackle for loss. So, he's coming into his own as far as a defensive lineman. And, you're looking at Tracy Porter before he got injured. He was doing some great things. Omar Gaither having 6 tackles as well and 1 interception. As a matter of fact, the interception that he had, I mean, he stretched out and, was full horizontal when he made the interception. So you have some guys that are moving around on the defensive end. You have some guys on the offense that are trying to show that they want to make the team, and so, yeah, those are definitely bright spots.
And as you mentioned, up next, the Chicago Bears in Week 3. The starters will probably play into the third quarter. It's the dress rehearsal normally for the start of the regular season.
Yeah, some coaches though in week 3 they kind of scale it down a little bit, especially if you want to take a look at some of your rookies and some of the players that are undrafted. You want to see, who can actually be that bright spot and try to make that 53-man roster. So it will be interesting to see if some of the first stringers play into the third quarter. I'm believing, from the offensive side of the ball, if they want to keep Matt Flynn healthy, that they would pull him out early.
Yeah, that might be a very good move considering he went down 5 times in New Orleans, and it would be smart to keep not only him but everybody that you can healthy, as they did get hit a little bit with the injury bug. Tracy Porter having the groin issue, and it's never a good thing when especially a veteran like a Tracy Porter that you have brought in to help the youngsters and try and teach them the way and teach them how to win and how to play right football, that now he's going to be out for a while.
Yeah, and so as the coaches always say, it's the next man up. And so when you're looking for that next man up, which DB is going to step up and show? Will it be Chimdi Chekwa? Of course, we've got DJ Hayden being cleared to play this weekend. So you have to ask yourself how much will he play and how big of an impact will he be in the secondary? From the looks of things, I mean, this guy is an athlete. He can flat out fly. And, it remains to be seen, in full contact, 11 on 11, can he do those things that we see him doing in the drills from day in and day out? If he can, he's definitely one of the exciting and bright spots for the Oakland Raiders.
Do you think he's got to be a little bit nervous, speaking about Hayden, to get in there and either give that first hit or possibly take a hit and just be able to get up and know, hey, okay, I'm going to be all right?
Yeah, he's been chomping at the bit for a while, and, he believes that he's, close to 100%. It's funny because he's not put in the limelight, and indeed he shouldn't because he's a rookie. But if you look at RG3 and what's been going on day in and day out, every time he sneezes or does something or says something, as far as wanting to play, everybody falls on his every word. Well, the same could be said for DJ Hayden. He has been chomping at the bit since day one, and since they put that red jersey on him, he's felt like he's been able to play and he wants to play. I know that the Raiders are taking precaution, but I believe after that first hit, after he takes that first collision, it's going to be back to old hat, and he's going to be flying around to the football.
Well, let's hope so, because he did some great things in college, and that unfortunate injury, and it'd be great to have a happy ending to that story.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Just a bit of a silver lining for that defense and something to look forward to, and having somebody like a DJ Hayden roaming around in the secondary, and hopefully he can get a lot of picks and interceptions and put himself into Raider folklore.
That's the voice of Sean Boyd. I'm Sean Wally, otherwise known as the Double S Express, here on Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central. And we had former Raider draft pick Ryan Riddle on, who is now with Bleacher Report and also a fellow co-host here on Pro Football Central. Great stuff from Ryan, what it was like being a Raider and playing in the NFL.
Yeah, and again, it was good to have Ryan on, because it's always good to have, former Raiders and Raiders, anybody who's in the Raider Nation. Of course, he has his show, and that's going to be on Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern, Football Debate Central Radio. And so, yeah, please go on to Pro Football Central and check out his show. He's got Vincent Frank on with him. And so, it should be one of those shows of hard debates. I'm believing, it's something similar to the ones that we see on ESPN, if you know what I mean.
And coming up this Friday, their special guest is Anthony Adams, former NFL player as well. So should be a good show.
Yeah, definitely. And so, again, it was good having Ryan Riddle on the show. It was great getting a chance to talk more Raider football. And again, hey, let's take a deep breath here, Raider Nation, because the best is yet to come. I know that it was a tough week this past week, but definitely things are going to be a lot better. We're looking forward to seeing the Oakland Raiders take on the Chicago Bears. And, let's see if the offense can start clicking. What I want to see is if Darren McFadden can actually get a few more yards there, Sean. And I want to see if the receiving corps can actually put something together as well. So we're going to wrap this one up. Raider Nation fans, it has been great. Be sure to catch our show on Pro Football Central. And again, you are listening to Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.